And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast. We got a great show for you here today. We have a good friend of mine, lifelong South Bronx resident, lifelong Democrat, community advocate. You often see her on social media blasting both sides of the aisle when it comes to politics, when it comes to common sense legislation. She's also part of a new group that we're going to talk about, One City Rising, where they're pushing for moderate common sense politicians and policy. We're going to get into that. I'd like to welcome, as always, I'm joined by my good friend and my partner in crime, most complained cop in the NYPD, Eric Dim. And Eric, could you introduce our good friend over here?
Outstanding. Lattina Brown, it's a pleasure to meet you. So we had just spoke offline, and it was interesting some of the stuff that you were talking about as far as being a community advocate. And I was asking you, what exactly does it mean to be a community advocate? And you said some pretty interesting stuff. I was pretty excited for you to actually tell the people on the podcast about this. So I think you have a great story. We have some commonalities to share. I mean, I worked in the South Bronx a long time. You grew up in the South Bronx, so we know the area very well. I actually lived in the Bronx a long time myself, almost a decade, in the Pelham Bay, Thrives Neck area. So, Lattina, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up, where you grew up, and what made you become a community advocate? Because the way you explained advocate was really interesting. And the fact that you're really not being compensated monetarily for what you do. So please explain to me how you got to this point. I'm excited to meet you. I see you got a great smile, so let's do it.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, John and Eric. It's an honor to be here with you guys. So I was born in Harlem. I come from a Caribbean background. I worked in local government and New York City Council. So I worked in the finance division, and I also worked in the Office of General Counsel division at City Council. And then I went on and worked into NYPD Community Affairs Bureau for just a short period of time. What prompted me to become a community advocate, I think it started about 15 years ago. I recently moved to the Bronx 15 years ago, South Bronx, and I saw some things that just wasn't, right in the Bronx. Homelessness, housing issues, and basically politicians just, not doing their jobs. So I think that's what kind of forced my hand to decide to get into community advocacy. And I think there was more of a lack of respect for our law enforcement, for our veterans, for our seniors. I think all of it just kind of lumped up into one. And I just said, you know what? Enough is enough already, because we have to raise our families in these communities. We don't want them exposed to this type of condition. So I started advocating on small issues like housing. Housing is a number one issue right now in the Bronx, in Harlem, in low income communities. And, I started to take on this issue. And of course, I'm going to bump heads with politicians, and they don't like that because, as you know, when it comes to housing, who do you have behind the scenes? The real estate developers that kind of fund their campaign. So yes, it was an uphill battle. I've been doing housing advocacy for over 10 years. So I just want to explain the difference between community advocate and activist. Community advocates is when you take on a role of advocating for policies that will help benefit the community as a whole. You are not paid to do this. You are volunteering your time to meet with stakeholders. You are the middleman for the community, the elected officials, nonprofits, businesses, whatever the case may be. You're fighting for a cause. You're fighting for policies to make things right. Activists, community activists, the people that you see rallying and doing all of these protests and being radical, they are paid from different groups to be radical, to be activists. So when I hear that word activist, I stray away from it because that is not who we are. That's not what I stand for. Advocates, you're advocating for policy to help make things right, to undo the damage that was caused by politicians that's in office and other groups. So I just want to thank you guys for having me here on this platform to kind of explain what the difference is between the two. But I am a community advocate. I'm going to continue to be a community advocate, unpaid, fighting for the right issues.
No, thank you for explaining that. I mean, I consider myself now, after you say that, I consider myself also a community advocate, a common sense advocate, police advocate, common sense policing, common sense legal reform. So I appreciate you explaining that, and also explaining the difference between an activist and basically confirming that they are paid. Because, I mean, you see the same people on every different issue out there on the street, getting in cop faces, causing
Disrespecting
problems,
them,
screaming, disrespecting not only the cops, but the public, the workers, the tourists, anybody on the street, really taking our First Amendment protections and protesting and really turning them on their head, really pushing the law and trying to blur the lines. And creating an unsafe environment. So I don't consider myself an activist either, because I don't go out on the street. And people say that, I'm just not a protester. It's not really me. I will show up at a rally once in a blue, but it's not. I feel like I'm more effective in this role. And same thing for Eric. He's a CCRB advocate. He's a community advocate. He's a common sense advocate.
I've seen your stuff, Eric. Very good.
So Lattina, there's a newly formed organization that I believe you sit on the board for. Could you explain what One City Rising is to the audience?
Well, One City Rising is a 50c14. It was founded by Maria Danzillo. Maria Danzillo is a former candidate. She ran for city council and she ran for the senator's seat in Manhattan. Amazing, amazing woman. She's a lawyer. She's a mom, a wife, you name it all. But we decided to form this group with, of course, common sense leaders from different political backgrounds to try to push out socialists and progressives out of office. So what we do is we advocate for policies. We just touched on advocacy, and we sit down and work with elected officials who are moderates, common sense. We can endorse both Democrats and Republicans who are not far left, who are not far right, but we all share the same common sense agenda. So with the One City Rising, we are forming relationships, not just in New York City. We're forming relationships in New York State, outside of New York, across the United States. We want to bring everybody on board so that we can try to fight against the socialists and the progressives and get them out of office. We want to mobilize people to get them out there to vote, and also get familiar with who One City Rising is and what we're about. That's basically what we're trying to do. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback, especially with the socialists that's basically spreading anti-Semitism in the communities, which is another concern. So I think that this is going to be a really, really good, successful project. And I look forward to continue working with Maria to spread the message, to get the word out there to the people. We need to clean up our own backyard. We need to stop complaining, take action, and start working with folks and push these agendas out and start mobilizing people.
I love hearing what you're saying. I worked in the South Bronx a long time as a special operations lieutenant with the NYPD. I was very active there, pulling illegal guns off the street, trying to help the community out. And it's a great community, and it was very divided. You know that they're building up Sobro, and they're really trying to gentrify a portion of the neighborhood alongside housing, which is interesting as your housing advocacy. So you talk about what you're saying is your boots on the ground with this organization, and you're out there with the community, and you have an opportunity to be influential, to have the community vote common sense, things that make sense. So how have you had success in implementing this to the community to tell them that they need to vote away from the socialist democratic ideas? Because I've seen it. I've seen it that they're promising minorities, and they're promising poor things that they really can't give them. They're promising funding and all ideas that it's just not there. So how can you be influential and change their minds when they've been sold a bag of goods that's just useless and wasteless. And we see the South Bronx just completely deteriorating. It's unfortunate. It's just getting worse. I saw a moment in time, especially in Monhaven, where we thought there might be a rise in real estate, and it just completely, it's crumbling and unraveling. So how do you be influential to get the people to understand that this socialist idea is not in their favor?
Thank you for the question. That's a very good question. I've spoke about this in the past when I ran for city council against a progressive. And I guess when I ran for office, my views were too moderate for them. I wasn't progressive. I didn't meet the agenda of fitting in with the other so-called progressive Democrats. So what we're doing now with OCR is that we have people sign up so they can receive, information from us. We always encourage voters to take a look at our website to see what we post on a daily basis, and literature. We have different generations of people who live in different communities, right? So for our millennials and Generation Z, they're more in tune to social media. So I post like videos to spread awareness about what's happening in the community, what's happening not just in the Bronx, but in the state overall with this socialist ideology. And I tell the Black and Brown community, stop voting down the line. I'm a Democrat, and I am embarrassed for my party because they have gone too far left. So I've done videos in the past. You can look me up. I'm not shy to speak out against the party. I voted for Republicans. It's time for us to break away from the cycle of voting down the line. Literature is so important. Meetings is so important. For our senior citizens, our veterans, we have to do the outreach. We have to go out into the community. And that's what we're planning on doing. We have our first executive board meeting tonight where we will be discussing that. That will be part of our agenda for next year's election and going forward. We have to send out information based on the needs of the different generations, because Generation Z is not going to pick up a piece of paper and read. They're into TikTok, they're into Twitter, they're into Instagram, Facebook, and all these other tools that's accessible for us to use. YouTube, Generation Z, millennials. I'm a millennial, so I know, but I also read. I read the papers, but we have to, mobilize and do the outreach. And I think that having a collaboration of people from different backgrounds and across the city and state is useful, because we can reach out to our community partners and disseminate that information to them, and they'll spread the word in their communities as well. So outreach is very important on different platforms.
It's honestly, it's so needed now across the country, really, because we've seen the progressive take in politics just sweep and take hold. And it really is one party rule in all of these democratic states. And we've seen it go too far left. And what we're seeing now with organizations like yourself, and with relationships that are being formed with all of us, Republican, conservative, Democrat, little to the left Democrat, we're all kind of in the middle, like, hey, this is wrong. Something needs to change. Like, we need to change the course. And I believe exactly what you guys are doing is right. I believe voter apathy and low information voting is causing these problems. We're not out there with the communities. The communities don't understand the issues. They have very low information on the issues that they are concerned with, regardless of the generation. And they're just getting the far left progressives. Honestly, they control all of the money, all of the big political donations, all of the media. So it's so important for us to get out there on social media and say, hey, look, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm a Democrat, but this is what we believe as a community member, not as a political hack, not as a big corporation, or not as big media. So, I mean, I think that's huge. I wanted to talk a little bit about there was and what you're seeing, not only through all these collaborations, we're seeing something that very important happened in the South Bronx recently. We've seen a 64% Democratic registered voter district in New York City Council swing and vote for a Republican candidate Christy Mamorato over Marjorie Velasquez. Could you talk a little? Could you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. That race was a very heavily contested race. I think the entire New York City was watching that race. So that race, we were very skeptical about it. I think that what hurt Marjorie is the fact that she sold her people out. She sold out the community for real estate developers. And I think that the Democrats were just tired of being taken for granted in that prospective district. District 13, that's the Throsneck area, that's City Island. You're familiar with that area. And we didn't have, like, at the time, I think during the primary, we didn't have like a strong enough candidate to take on Marjorie because she's backed by the political machines. And I personally know Marjorie. I feel like when people get into office, they change, right? And she broke her promises to the constituents. So Democrats, moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans and independents joining forces, I think it was a beautiful thing. I think that, and that district is 64% Democrat with only 14% Republican. So it was like a strong collaboration of different community leaders coming out for Christy Mamorato. I was happy to see that, a lot of people were supportive of her. And I felt like I knew in my heart she was going to win that race because she's very much, for the community. She's not a politician. She's a mom. She works in the healthcare. She's like us. She cares about the issues in her community. And I felt like it was the right thing to support her, even though I knew I was going to get the backlash, which, I don't regret. But she has common sense values, and she's pro law enforcement. And, it was one of the most beautiful things. I think we set a new tone. We sent a strong message to the machines. Like, you don't control us. You don't get to dictate and tell us who we can and cannot vote for. Don't underestimate the vote. And to be honest with you, I think that New York needs to flip. I think they need to go purple. I think the one party rule doesn't work. There needs to be some type of balance. We need a reset. And Bronx City Council District 13 race was a very, very strong message.
I think that's great. It's so interesting. What I'm curious to ask you also is you talked about this candidate, which we know of, who's pro law enforcement, right? But yet at the same token, Marjorie, was pushing for defunding the police. Was that something that hurt her votership? Because the Lieutenant's Benevolent Association, along with the PBA, endorsed Marjorie. So who was also behind the push for defunding the police? Do you think that also hurt her position of winning the candidacy?
I think it played a role because that district is there's a lot of retired cops that live in that district. And, I think she underestimates, the voters who are very much pro law enforcement. She took them for granted. And she sat on that progressive caucus. I don't know if you remember in city council when city council members formed this progressive caucus to target law enforcement. OCR, we were out there holding a press conference. I think it was earlier this year in March, standing up for our law enforcement. We stood there with both Democrats, Republicans, and independents calling out this progressive caucus and demanding that they dismantle this progressive caucus. After we held that press conference, Marjorie decided to leave the progressive caucus because they got a lot of backlash. And listen, we need our NYPD. Something happens, I'm calling 911. Who's going to come out to defend our senior citizens and our veterans and families, women and children? Our law enforcement, we need to have respect for them. And there's no such thing as abolishing NYPD. So she hurt herself in that area by promoting the abolishment of law enforcement. And I think it didn't sit well with her voters. And it affected her in her reelection. So, Christy was the number one choice. I was very disappointed that the PBA did not endorse Christy. I did say something to them about that on social media. I think you see that on my Twitter page, John. But I think they got behind the wrong candidate. They're following the political machines, and we need to dismantle that. We need to stop that.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, when I looked up both the candidates, Marjorie did leave the Progressive Caucus, but she never apologized, and she continued. I don't have a problem if a candidate made a mistake. You supported defund the police, but what I've seen from the progressives, even the ones like Justin Brannan that stepped outside of the Progressive Caucus, they just pretend like it never happened. And now because they voted on a new budget for the city, they're saying, I voted to fund the police. No, you didn't. You voted to fund your own paycheck, because if you didn't pass that budget, you wouldn't get paid. The police are getting funded. You didn't vote to fund it. But Marjorie's platform was still, she wanted to get rid of Rikers. She was in support of not changing bail reform at all. She was still far left on a lot of different issues, such as drag story hour, which I personally believe should not be getting funded through city money and taxpayer money. If you want to take your children there, this is America, but I don't believe that politicians should be pushing this, or the city should be paying for children to sit down with drag queens. I believe this is more of a performance base than an educational base. I believe that we're very open-minded here, and I don't believe that there is an anti-gay or anti-trans sentiment across New York City. We've always been a very accepting city, even from a young child. And the age in the 80s, we were very accepting of all different cultures and backgrounds. And I just thought like that also affects police officers, and it was still that progressive twinge. So I mean, you kind of said that you don't agree that they should have endorsed her. I was very vocal about it. Eric was very vocal about it. What do you have to say though about the NYPD currently as it sits? Like, what are you hearing from the community? What does the community want in relation to policing? And are we doing a good job? Could it be improved? Like what are your thoughts, and like what are you hearing from the community as far as policing? Because public safety is the number one issue across New York City as it sits.
That's a very good question, John. Thank you for asking me. I've had spoken with some of the community leaders and some of the constituents, and their biggest concern is lack of police officers in the subways. That most of the crimes are happening in the subways, and people are afraid. We would love to see more police presence in the subways. However, it sucks when you have our cops, out here, playing social services in the community. They're not social workers. We need our police to be out there in the community to protect our constituents, and not out here flipping burgers. I'm sorry. We can use the extra manpower at the local precincts. That some of these precincts are understaffed. I get it. We have like an influx of cops, police officers exiting the agency because guess what? They're not being respected. They're not being supported. They're not being treated fairly. Would you want to work for an employer who's not backing you? No. Like, I feel like there needs to be more of a positive leadership in the executive level. There's a lot of favoritism. You have good cops who are busting their behinds every day, serving the communities, working really hard, and they're being overlooked for promotions. They're being disrespected, not just by the community, but also behind the scenes. And that right there needs to stop. We need to change the leadership from behind the scenes, pull out these officers from the community affairs and assign them to these precincts because they are understaffed. And this is mostly in the low-income communities, the communities with the high crimes. We're the ones who are being affected by this. So every time you pull out a cop and you're sending them downtown to work out of the executive office, that hurts us because that's less manpower for that precinct. So when something happens and we put in a call with 911, how long do you think it's going to take for that cop to arrive if that precinct is understaffed? It's really sad. We need to respect our law enforcement and give them more support. And if PVA is listening to this, I have nothing against you, but you need to stand up for your police officers. Back them. Have their backs.
Lattina, you just said so much valuable information. There's so much to unpack here. I'd love to start with the last thing that you just said. Absolutely. It's unfortunate, but here we are, 2023, and it's my opinion, it's my position, and John agrees as well, that the unions are outdated and they're no longer useful in the manner that they should be. Honestly, it's come to the point where they're more like a modified fraternal organization. Even at this point, as a cop, you're probably better off getting support from the Hispanic Society, or if you're Jewish, from the Shalom Society. You'll probably get better support than you would from getting the unions, or funding yourself, which most likely is being done as we speak when cops are in situations that we call being jammed up or in a pickle, that you end up hiring your own attorneys. The unions are powerless, they're ballless, and they've really proved to show that, and they're endorsing the wrong candidates. So at this point, honestly, it's become more of a fraternal organization. I'm on the phone constantly with cops, lieutenants, different rank and file on the job right now, active and retired. And we discussed the unions, and I asked them, why are you even paying union dues anymore? Why are you paying a retirement? What do you get out of it? And honestly, I don't know. They get newsletters and calendars and invites to luncheons. But other than that, the unions are very singular, and it just comes to pushing contracts. And there's a lot of information you said here. It's great. You spent some time with community affairs. And I've been a huge advocate, not an activist, I love what you said, a huge advocate for intrusive police work, not the community affairs side of policing. I myself, a special operations lieutenant, was out there in the South Bronx. You didn't have to call 911. I was doing anti-crime police work in plain clothes. We were out there doing intrusive police work, finding the guns. You didn't even have to call 911. We knew who all the players were. But I became, along with other cops, a target by an overzealous civilian complaint review board. And you talk about support, and we do need support. And we need support, and we need the civilian complaint review board to stop with this bias move and this anti-rhetoric towards police officers so they could actually do intrusive police work. So what's your position and what's your stance on the Civilian Complaint Review Board? And what is your ideology of what is a good cop? Because I myself, as the most complained cop doing intrusive police work, I've been targeted by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. For some, they might say, hey, you were an amazing cop. Look at your record, it shows. And for some, they'll say, well, you have all the civilian complaints. You're not a good cop. So what is your position on that?
Well, the CCRB, that's a whole different, that's a whole different beast. I know it's like, I feel like you need to take the politics out of CCRB. I think that there's too much politics involved. I think that city council is too much hands-on CCRB. I think that it needs to be more of independent. It's not, even though they claim to be independent, but they're not really independent, because city council, they have their hands in it. And I think that as far as, law enforcement, I think that our police officers should be given a chance. I think that our law enforcement officers continue to be ignored on a daily basis. I think that there needs to be a change in how things are structured. I don't want to say too much because I might just I might say something that's going to not sit well with the executives. But I think that the entire leadership, they got to go. They got to go. There needs to be some new faces. There needs to be people with integrity. There needs to be people who are adamant about serving the community. Good cops. Here's a definition of a good cop. A good cop will go out of his way to make sure that that constituent is being represented, that constituent is being served, regardless if it's in your area or not. You have cops now who are saying, well, I'm not going to touch that. That has nothing to do with me. That's not my division. That's not my area. That's not my area of expertise. No, but you're law enforcement. I remember the cops back in my days. We knew the police officers by name. The police officers were out there walking the beat. They were talking with constituents. They would engage with the constituents. They were coming into the buildings and speaking. Some of them would even do like wellness check. We don't have that anymore. I wish we can bring that back, but we are in a situation now where our police officers are so restricted from doing things because we have city council involved who are basically I feel like they're micromanaging NYPD. And that shouldn't be the case. I feel like CCRB is not giving you guys leg room to actually do your job. I feel like CCRB they're working in partnership with city council to try to restrict you guys, and that affects us. That hurts us. I think you need to hear more from the community and less from politicians. I think that CCRB need to do some outreach and actually talk with the constituents. And when was the last time they've ever held a citywide town hall to get feedback from real people like myself? Can you recall a time? I don't think that's ever happened.
Well, they do community outreach, but I mean, it's restricted. And, you know, like me and Eric attend these meetings, and they have like a monthly meeting. Nobody really knows about it. We've been trying to spread awareness about it, to like go out there and just advocate for common sense. Like Eric's the most complained cop. He has the most amount of CCRBs, but he's not
doing his job.
But he's not sitting here saying abolish the CCRB. He's saying that cops like myself, like him, like that are out on the street, they deserve fair and proper investigations.
Yeah.
And the case that we've been making in this podcast and through their own testimony at these hearings, at city council hearings, is that they're just have become this government agency that is trying to prove their own existence and are reverse engineering their investigations. So and that's not helping anybody, right? Like we're just saying, give cops due process, give them a fair and proper investigation, and give them attainable goals and standards. Like, you know, I personally believe that everyone that sits on the CCRB board, the entire upper echelon of the NYPD, the entirety of the mayor's office, they could not operate effectively and not get complaints as we sit today, as New York City sits today, as the policy that's been created in New York City sits today. So I think there's a lot of there's a lot of gray that we definitely need to delve into, and we'd love to speak offline with One City Rising about that as well, because we believe in transparency with the public and common sense, and we don't want dirty cops, and we don't want our children or ourselves being brutalized by the police. We are the community right now, especially in retirement, right? We are the community. We're not any different than anybody else. And so I think the common sense is what we're trying to get out there and advocate for. And the same goes for, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, right? He's involved in what people say is a corruption scandal now. He just got his phones taken, his phone and his iPad taken. Everybody wanted to know my thought on it. And all I said was, he deserves due process. He deserves a fair and proper investigation. If it is determined that he gets charged and arrested at some point, then at that point he deserves due process. At this point, he's involved in investigation. And as much as I am not a fan of New York City Mayor Eric Adams,
we know.
I would not wish a reversed engine. I would not wish him to be found guilty before he was ever even fairly investigated.
I agree. I agree.
And just if you could, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree with you. Innocent until proven guilty, and I think the same should apply to our law enforcement. We're so quick to judge based on what we see or hear in the media without giving that person, their due process. So for our law enforcement, I feel like you guys are not getting that support because of the unions, the delegates. I'm not trying to crap on the delegates, or I'm pro law enforcement, but I feel like there needs to be some changes from the bottom going up, from top to bottom. And if you don't have executives who, like, from the PC to the, going on down to the unions, if they're not backing up a cop who's accused of something, then what's the point of paying union dues? What's the point of, being in an agency who's not going to have your back? And I think that's where the problem lies. So maybe if we send a message to law enforcement, like, hey, what are you paying union dues if they're not going to support you? They're going to throw you under the bus and say, hey, you're going to have to take this 30-day loss because you've been accused of doing X, Y, Z, but there's no actual evidence to support these so-called claims. And CCRB is just gunning for blood. I don't want to say gunning for blood, but they're just, out here on a mission to hurt our law enforcement. So we need to start taking a look at who's on the CCRB board and how are they connected to the local elected officials. I can guarantee that they are connected to these local elected officials. It's just about doing research, and you need to restructure that whole board so that everybody can get their due justice. And I always say this, if you see a cop, and I'm not saying all cops, but there are good cops who go out there, but if you see a cop who's been hit 30 times by CCRB, he's doing his damn job. He's doing his damn job, and the people out there, they're taking advantage. They know that CCRB is going to attack these cops without doing the proper research. That cop is doing his job. So that cop that's getting hit with 30 plus complaints now is going to feel like, well, what's the point of me making these arrests and doing my job if I'm going to keep getting hit with complaints by CCRB and it's unsubstantiated? So I think that there needs to be changes behind the scenes. And CCRB is the beast in itself, but you need to see who the players are and how they're connected to these elected officials. I guarantee they're connected to them.
Well, first and foremost, all the stuff that you're speaking, obviously you show a great amount of adversity and definitely versatility when it comes to policing, and as far as being a community advocate and your knowledge of politicians and what's going on in the area. I'm quite impressed. It's obviously boots on the ground. It's obvious that you care. And let me tell you, when it comes to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, I as the most complaint cop, I was targeted by an overzealous Civilian Complaint Review Board, and the timing was impeccable. At the same time, the disciplinary matrix came to its inception, which showed extreme penalties, which had actually now turned to termination. So the game and the rules completely changed. And what I can say is this: I used to tell my cops, I was a huge advocate to tell my cops this: we have great power. With that power, we have to have great responsibility. This is one of the few jobs in the world that you can walk outside right now. You can say, "Hey, boss, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. I'm going to get a slice of pizza," and you can walk across the street, and you can end up in a gun battle, and you could take someone's life because it's for the good of the city, because you're saving someone else's life, and immediately have your coffee afterwards, and then have an investigation. So yes, we have extreme power. But with that comes responsibility. So yes, we should expect a full investigation. We should expect to be held accountable to explain why we took those actions. It's amazing power to have that ability to take someone's life. But we also have to be savvy and explain our observational skills. And what makes us so unique as police officers is that we see things that others don't see, and to put other people in that position. So I always felt, yes, it's important to have a Civilian Complaint Review Board. It's important to have the Internal Affairs Bureau. It's important to have Department of Investigation. It's important to have other cops policing each other, because it's about balance. And we need that with this great power, because we could take it to the wrong realm. But we do police each other, right? But with that, there should be fair investigations. And these investigations prove to be completely reverse engineered. John and I attend these meetings on a monthly basis, and I hope you have an opportunity to attend the meeting, maybe not this one because it's coming tomorrow or the next day after, but the following month. And you can hear it's just this anti-rhetoric. And John and I have witnessed Oliver Rice herself, the acting chair of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, say they don't take into account what's going on with the police department, the police officer, him or herself, or the environment, just the emotions based on the civilian complaint, the civilian themselves. And that's wrong. It should be about mending the situation. How do we look at the totality of circumstances? How do we look at the relationship between the community and the police department to make the public safe? So it's not about public safety. It is about abolishing the police. It's unfortunate. And the other thing I want to talk about that you mentioned is the micromanagement. And micromanagement, we know, and I can tell you from my experience, reading numerous leadership books and what I've learned in the Marine Corps. I was an honor graduate officer candidate school, and I've learned that micromanagement is the least effective type of management or leadership type of style that you can use. Why? Because it deteriorates any opportunity to have creative thinking. So that's what you're talking about. When the police officers say, well, I can't go to this location, or that's not my assignment, it's because they're afraid to think outside the box and to have critical thinking, because they're micromanaged. And how do we know that's true? Right now, they just implemented a new system where they conduct roll call. Not only are you being supervised by your sergeant, your lieutenant, and potentially your commanding officer, but now you're going to be watched on camera while you're conducting roll call. So there's just too much oversight. there's too much micromanagement, and the cops cannot think for themselves, which would be the better of public safety. So obviously, it's important to you for public safety being out in the Bronx. And unfortunately, the Bronx has been riddled and affected by crime. So what do you tell your constituents, and what do you tell the people in the street who to vote for and how it affects them when it comes to crime and their relationship with the police department?
Well, I tell people this. I put out my videos. OCR is this group that we're going to be pushing all this information out there into the community. We're going to be mobilizing. We just have to do some door knocking and educate people. I think it's very important, because I looked at the recent voter turnout for these elections. It was very low and disappointing in the Bronx. The Bronx we're ranked as number 62. You know this, right? We're ranked as number 62 as being unhealthy, heavily polluted, dangerous. We got to change that. And it's been this way for decades. And I'm like, why are we still stuck in this position? Why? Because we have elected officials with empty resumes in office. And that needs to change. We need to start doing research on people who are running for office, not handpicked candidates who are getting elected and we know nothing about them. This is just a paycheck for them. This is about them pushing radical agendas for their donors and for the lobbyists and the people behind the scenes. It hurts all of us across the board, regardless if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent. We are all affected by radicalism and socialism. And we need to start mobilizing, door knocking, take it old school if we have to, because the Bronx is just, we got to come out of this situation. And I'm not liking what I'm seeing with the crimes, the lack of funding. Where is our tax dollars going? We don't want to see repackaged welfare. It's an insult to the Black and brown community. You tell us, hey, vote for us, and we're going to give you a bag of chicken and potatoes. And then we'll see you in 4 years or 2 years. But yet that mom just recently had to bury their son or daughter because of gun violence, gang violence, assault, or they had to bury a loved one because of violence. You can't bring back their loved ones. All you're doing is selling them a dream, and you're selling them, lies, dream and lies. So we need to start voting outside of Democrat. I don't care if the person is independent, but this person is bringing policies that make sense, that's common sense. I'm going to vote for that person that's going to do right by the community. I don't care if you're Black, brown, yellow, green, orange. I don't care what your ethnicity is. I don't care what your sexual preferences are. I care about the policies that you're trying to implement in the community that will impact us in a positive way, because we have a younger generation who are up and coming, who need leaders that's going to represent them in a positive manner and not sell them lies and indoctrinate our children.
Well said. I'm reading Edwin Raymond's book now.
Amazing.
So Edwin has a progressive spin on things from what I take. I always look at him as a polar opposite to myself, to Eric's ideology. But reading his book, there are things I disagree with, and then we're going to do a review on that soon on the show. But he says one thing in there, and it just rang in my soul. He said politicians create legislation based around public safety and policing, but their only knowledge of policing is what they see on TV. They have no idea the effects that this is actually going to have on public safety. They pass this legislation from what they believe a cop is based on what they've seen on a television show. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, he's so right. It's so true, there's just so much nonsense. And you talk about money and money being spent. I myself am against the violence intervention program. I believe that it's a grift. I believe that it's sending money to friends and family. It's shrouded in mystery. and it does zero to improve public safety, and it might even impede public safety from what I've been seeing. What are your thoughts on the violence intervention program?
I think it's bullcrap. I think that the whole program is a joke. It's basically community leaders. Some of them are, I don't think they're vetted, to be honest with you. They don't have licenses, and they're unvetted. To my understanding, when I spoke with some of the community leaders, some of them are active gang members working for these violence interrupter groups. I'm like, why are we funding them? Why not take that money and put it to better use and fund our local precincts, because they're going to need that money because they have the precinct council. I don't know if you're aware, the precinct council gets a separate funding to go out there and do community events.
No, I wasn't aware.
Are you? Yeah. So the precinct councils, that's how we have our precinct council meetings. They're the ones, the council president, organize events like holiday events, Thanksgiving events, you name it. Why are we not putting that money into their council so that it can bring balance to the local precincts? They have they have an entire precinct council board, and they need fund. They're in dire need of fundings. They have to rely on outside fundings and fundings from these radical politicians who, of course, are going to try and control the precinct council, because they're like, oh, if I give you $5,000 for your precinct council, you have to do as I say. No, take that money from the violence interrupter groups and give that money to the precinct councils. If you want real effective change, you can do it through the precinct council.
I like to shift gears here for a moment, and it's probably something that's going to make people uncomfortable. And I can tell you're not going to be uncomfortable. You seem like, you're pretty witty and you're pretty confident. But if we were the NYPD, which we're not the NYPD anymore, according to Mayor Eric Adams, we would be celebrating that you're the first female Black community advocate on New York's Finest Unfiltered podcast. But for me and John, I'm sure we're just happy to have someone as intelligent and passionate as you are. So you are our first community community advocate on the podcast. But so I like to ask you, right, because you're talking about public safety, your relationship with the community. Obviously, you're very knowledgeable about the police department. You spend all this time in the community affairs. And we've had a complete failure from leadership. Now, we saw some signs of hope from former police commissioner Key Chan-Sewell, who was the first. Well, thank you. She was the first appointed female Black, right? Mm-hmm. Now, John and I have an expressive, right? We support women. We support women in an organization. We support women of power. But we support is the most and best suitable candidate. And we both feel that she really never had an opportunity to show the capabilities that she has. We saw the potential. I do say this, and I put out some tweets, stuff on social media. She showed more balls at the end than her predecessors and also her successor. But what I could say is this: how do you feel about her being appointed as the first female Black in this position? And then, honestly, I feel like she was just completely shunned. She was treated like, like children. You could be seen but not heard, and they kind of put her in the corner and never gave her an opportunity to have the legs that she should have. It was almost like baby, put baby in the corner. So almost like from Dirty Dancing. So what is your position about that? How do you feel? Do you feel it's an insult that they said we're going to put the first female Black, or do you feel that was an honor? I mean, and what did the community feel about that as well for that and the correlation of public safety?
For me, I think it was a little bit of, it's a 50-50 type of situation. Labels shouldn't matter. I don't like labels. I look at the person's work and their resume, because we talked about resumes, the empty resumes. I think that skin color doesn't matter. Ethnicity doesn't matter. I care more about the work and what you're going to do to make NYPD stronger. And she was the best, but I felt like she wasn't allowed to be her best. I felt like she was restricted on so many levels. Here it is. You have an extraordinary leader with an absolute amazing resume, just years of dedicated services, and just her work is so impeccable. How dare you not allow this person to go out there and show what she's made of, and try to restructure, NYPD to make it better. I felt like she was just not given that opportunity because she was just put there as just a face. It's an insult. It was a slap in our face, not just the Black community, I think all over, because there were some cops who were upset when she left because she was a cop's cop. Let's be honest. She was a cop's cop. She's going to stand by her cops. She's going to do the right thing. She's not going to sit up here and be played. But I just felt like she just wasn't given that chance. And it's really sad because now with the current leadership, you can feel the difference. You can see the difference. The way she spoke, the way she carried herself, she was always there. She was always there. If no matter what, if there was an event, if there was a crime, or if a law enforcement was hurt, she was there. No ifs, ands, or buts. She didn't come out because, oh yeah, the press is there, because she wasn't really allowed to speak to the media. I don't know if you remember.
Wait. Hold on a minute. She wasn't in Qatar? Is that what you're telling me? Okay. I just want to clarify that.
She was always there, like 24/7. I'm like, when did this woman sleep? When did she sleep? So that's what a good cop and real leadership is about. You didn't see her out there partying. I'm sorry. I miss real leadership. She was on her A game. We got to give her that. But I felt like she just wasn't given the credit that she deserved. And at this point, it's not about skin color. I don't care what your ethnicity is. And I've said this 3 years ago. And people are like, oh, it should matter to you. It should matter. Blacks are not getting a seat at the table. No, we need to start working together regardless of skin color. I don't care about all that other, agenda that they're pushing out. That's just not for me. I look at the facts, and that's her resume.
No, yeah, I think it was a bigger slap in the face to women, honestly.
Yeah.
Like women in law enforcement, I think that was the bigger slap in the face than anything. Like you did not give her the reins that you gave her former whatever, not predecessors, whatever. But
predecessor and successor.
You did not give her the rein. Thank you. She did not get the rein, and I believe that was a slap in the face to women, especially from a mayor that said it has to be a woman.
Yeah,
my police commissioner will be a woman. But you gave her the title, but none of the power. I mean, I personally think it was a slap in the face. There are some women that do hold power in his administration, but it appeared that they weren't ready to give up the reins of the police department yet. That's not for women. Men have to control that. That's how it appeared to me, and I was like, wow, it's
competitive. There's a lot of jealousy too.
Yeah,
keep that in mind, because I've seen cops go through it. Good cops, and I'm like, why is there competition between the law enforcement and you guys work in the same division? You're supposed to be working together, not against each other. But it's a lot of competition behind the scenes. And as you well know, there's special preferences to some cops. So
listen, we've been going a while. I do want to get on the migrant crisis a little bit, what's going on. But before we do, before we do that, I am really curious your thoughts. Like, we've been seeing the police commissioner, we've been seeing the now made up title of assistant police commissioner, we've been seeing the chief of patrol traveling internationally and attending Somos, a Democratic lobbyist event that's like as police officers, I was always taught we had to be apolitical, right? I was always, I would, and I couldn't really align with either side, take photos with them, go out to eat with them. None of that, right? When I'm on duty, but I'm seeing a police commissioner in Puerto Rico with a shirt with his title on it, the chief of patrol, the assistant commissioner. As a community advocate, seriously, because I've never seen this before in the history, people in Israel. Like, what are your thoughts as a community advocate of the New York City Police Department now being an international organization traveling all over?
It's embarrassing. It's You need to be here. We have issues in New York City happening every day with the migrant crisis, the open border crisis. And you're in Puerto Rico doing God knows what. You're breaking your own rules. Isn't there a rule that NYPD is not allowed to engage in political activities, if I'm not mistaken? It's a slap in the face to the officers who are being punished for simple things, but you guys are breaking the rules that you put in the patrol guy. It's your rules. It makes
Sal
no
Greco.
sense. It makes no sense to me. So it's like, what are you doing in Puerto Rico? And we need you here. We need you right here. How are you affecting, policies in Puerto Rico? How is that helping New Yorkers while you're over there? It just doesn't make any sense. And I'm trying, and I'm not sure if this is on taxpayers' dime. Is this on taxpayers' dime? These trips?
I believe so. They say that
I
it's
think
not, but I believe that they're getting paid. I don't believe there's days off. I believe we paid for New York City taxpayers paid for the whole thing.
And you're making up positions, which is also a waste of taxpayers' money. These fake positions that they're creating to hook up, their friends or those that's part of the crew. I think it's right now we look very embarrassing to the community right now. It's very embarrassing.
Lattina, I've said it numerous times. I said on social media, when they go on these luxury trips, are they utilizing their own vacation time, or are they using time from the city? And if they are, it's taxpayer dollars. Absolutely. I know in the past, myself and my teams, we had asked to attend specific training, one at West Point, that would help out with leadership training. And we were told if we wanted to go, we could go, but it would be on our own dime, and we would utilize our own vacation time. So what makes this any different?
That's what I'd like to know. Someone needs to look into the expenses. Who's paying for it? It's like, but who do we have to look into these things? Because everything is controlled. They have their people in place. IAB, they got their people in place. Who do you have left to turn to? I mean, is DOI going to act out on it and do the proper investigation? It's like, come on now, people, wake up. Like they're making a mockery of taxpayers. You're making us look like fools. Why are you in these other countries and other states and not doing your job here in New York City when we have a migrant crisis? We have veterans who are kicked out of the shelters, sleeping on the streets, and you're up here taking in illegal, unvetted migrants who are getting free housing, food, clothes, you name it, and they're committing the crimes. Crimes increased since they've been in the city. I don't know if you are aware. Since they can't come into this, since they've been bust into the city, we had a huge influx of crimes. And I'm not saying I'm pro-immigrant, I am. But we need to get a hold on our migrant situation here in New York City. And I have to say that Joe Biden, and I'm not afraid to say it, I've said it many times, has done a disservice to New Yorkers. You take our votes and then you turn around and you throw a huge slap to New Yorkers' face by not addressing this migrant situation. And the mayor, and I've been very vocal about it, he dropped the ball on the migrant crisis. You are the commander in chief of New York City. You could have turned those buses back. You picked a fight with two governors. Should have mind your business and focused on your own backyard. You open up Pandora's box by letting illegal, unvetted migrants into our city. You put your constituents in danger. And to the city council members and the assembly members and the senator, they all played a hand in this. The radicals I'm speaking of. I'm not talking about the common sense leaders. The radicals, they all played a hand in this. You set us up for danger. And I have to say, I'm afraid of us entering a purge era. Welcome to the purge. And that's exactly what's going to happen. It's getting colder outside, and the unvetted migrants are getting very aggressive. They're getting very anxious because guess what? There's no money. There's no jobs. There's nowhere for them to stay. The shelters are very packed. I didn't even know what else to say.
Well, we've had a couple of candidates on here for city council, and one in particular, Helen Q, talking about the eyesore of the sex working industry right now that's going on with this migrant crisis. And I watch the news. I'm out here in Malaysia right now. I spent 3 months in Thailand. I'm traveling this Southeast Asia, and I heard someone say on TV, "Oh wow, especially on Roosevelt Avenue in Queens, they said, it looks like Bangkok out here right now." And I can tell you this: I spent a lot of time in Bangkok, and there is a red light district. There's a red light district in Bangkok. There's a red light district in most of the parts of Thailand. But I can tell you this: what I saw on TV on Roosevelt Avenue in Queens looked far worse, much slimier. It looked disgusting in comparison to Bangkok. Absolutely looked terrible. I mean, I just think this just totally decimates and it tears away from neighborhoods. And some can say, yes, it's a victimless crime. I understand that. But there's a time and place for everything. And the way it's put out there in the streets, it just looks terrible. It destroys our society, these neighborhoods. What's going on in the Bronx right now? Are we getting that same movement with the sex work industry for the migrants? Have you seen that? Are we seeing the quality of life just deteriorate because of migrant crisis?
Yes, we're seeing it in the Bronx. They're also getting bold and witty where they're going into private buildings to prostitute now in the open. They're going into the lobbies, the staircases, the hallways. I'm also a tenant leader, so we've been having these issues in the building, and I have reached out to management and to law enforcement and to the mayor's office about tenants running a brothel, literally like a sex trafficking thing in their homes. They're getting very bold and smart about it, and they're so out in the open with it that they could care less. And I'm like, well, this is impacting our quality of life. Why are you, to management? And I've spoken with people from the mayor's office who tried to be helpful, because they did reach out to a couple of people on my behalf, but management is just letting it all fall apart in high pack, high crime areas. They don't care. So we're seeing it, we're getting the full blunt of it. And Longwood Avenue, Hunts Point, in that area, it used to be a red light district area. You know that, right? So with the influx of migrants coming in, you're bringing it all back right now. And we can't afford to have that happening in our community, especially with the younger generation that's up and coming. We have schools in the area. We have, now the community is heavily saturated with methadone clinics. I think we have like 14 methadone clinics now. It's terrible. So we're getting hit triple times, left and right. So we see it here.
No, thanks for speaking about the migrant crisis too. I mean, I really worry about that. I was looking at the tent city that they pitched up in Floyd Bennett Field, and the millions of dollars we wasted to put really in a makeshift area that floods, that the power grid consistently fails on, especially in the wintertime. And I have no idea how anyone thinks that somebody should live there. And like, I'm not my family's immigrants. They immigrated here from Italy. Your family's immigrants, Eric's family's immigrants. We all came to this country for a better life. And I don't fault anybody for wanting to come here for a better life. But I believe they were sold a false bill of goods too. I believe that our elected officials, including Eric Adams, when he went on his intel gathering trip, was basically still told them, yeah, keep coming here. We have the money. We're going to do the right thing, And he's still pushing open borders to this day. I believe it greatly affects not only quality of life, but public safety, because like you said, it will lead to crime. And more than even just the day-to-day crime, I'm worried about the terrorism. I really am. I'm worried about the tempers are flaring up across the world. No one feels the world more than New York City. What are you seeing between these pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, and even a lot of, unfortunately, pro-Hamas gatherings that are happening every night in New York City? Like, what are your thoughts going on about all of this?
Well, first I want to say that I support both the Jewish and Muslim community. I've worked with them, and I will continue to work with both groups. What I think that's happening is between these radical groups that's coming out organizing these rallies. I think it's disgusting because you have politicians who are pushing anti-Semitism. This is what it is. It's not freedom of speech because these rallies, these protests are getting very violent. They're targeting the Jewish community, and I think it's horrible. It's very deplorable. I've seen pictures of politicians standing with these groups as they go out preaching some despicable, violent, vulgar, demeaning things to the Jewish community. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right. And now more than ever, the Jewish community, we have to stand with them. And I can say this, a huge chunk of the Muslim community are against these groups. They don't support that crap. They're standing with the Jewish community as well, because we all have to coexist. There's no, oh, you know, we're right, we're the better group, you guys are wrong. And when I hear this from the river to the sea, it's wrong. It's wrong. Like, do you know what you're talking about? Do you know what you're saying? And we see a lot of, schools, encouraging the children, the students to go out there and be radical, be, violent and discriminating against the Jewish community. So it comes a time where now elected officials have to start waking up and realizing, like, these colleges and these nonprofits who are not supposed to be involved in politics, by the way, because they've been using their 501c3 to be political and radical, and they're not supposed to be doing that. We need to start hurting their pockets, strip them of their fundings, start calling out these groups, remove them. But I am concerned about the possibility of terrorism. I'm afraid that we are so open that we don't know who is who in the city, who we're standing next to. And these protests is we got a clear understanding of what we're dealing with now. And it's very violent. So I'm terrified. I'm afraid for, the Jewish community. I'm afraid for myself. These people are not out here fighting, going on a crusade to fight for the Muslim community or for Palestine. I said, socialism, they're going to do it to us. They're going to target the blacks, the browns. I'm like, you better wake up, because this socialist ideology. Why do you think the migrants left their socialist countries to come here? Their countries collapsed under socialism. Did you know that? That's why they're here. You think they want to vote for socialist politicians? Absolutely not. And that's what these politicians are banking on. Let's get them here. Let's get them access to local elections so they can vote for us again. No, because you're socialist. That's what caused their countries to collapse.
It's quite interesting. I've been accused of being a Proud Boy, a white supremacist, a racist, all these kind of things. And the irony to this, I'm actually Jewish. I had a bar mitzvah myself. And it's interesting to watch these so-called rallies. You ask me, it's an act of terror. It's just complete violence. The occupying of the Brooklyn Bridge, just the fact you're impeding traffic. Someone could need to go to Bellevue for trauma. That's an act of violence. It's an act of terror. You could be impeding on someone's life from getting trauma at Bellevue. And people really don't understand the history.
Yeah.
Is there fault on both sides occupying in Israel and Palestine? Absolutely. But Hamas will not stop until they just completely just destroy Israel. They'll never stop. If Israel decides to lay down, Hamas will never stop.
They won't stop. They want to.
They'll never stop. And it's funny. You see these rallies out here. I see these young kids, these liberals, anti-police, but at the same token, they have these flags Queers for Palestine. And I say, wow, they really don't understand the history, because
have no idea.
If you were if you were queer in Palestine, they would throw you off a building. They would kill you. So what it leads me to believe, and John and I talk about this all the time, this is just it's like a cover band. And this is a cover band for BLM. It's another version of BLM. I do think that New York, the entire country, is seeking out their next George Floyd. It's just more movement for the Democratic Party, because look, right now Trump is in the lead, and the Democratic Party needs anything they can to cause disruption so that Trump doesn't get into office. I think this is all about that big picture. I really do think that this is part of seeking out George Floyd. John, you got anything?
Yeah.
Oh,
No.
I thought I lost you. Sorry. Now, yeah, I just, and on the other end of it, I mean, I'm disturbed as a former member of the NYPD from the reaction that I've seen from the NYPD at these protests. Ed Caban cheered on and accepted without even a fight from New York City Council that we were going to change the way that we responded to protests, pop-up protests, riots. And I see that very clearly in New York City when cops and Jewish people, or people who they thought were Jewish, who looked Jewish. I don't know how you look Jewish, but you look Jewish. They were spitting on people, kicking them, assaulting them, ripping down American flags. I saw the NYPD, a very emasculated version of them, as they just sat there and basically, let's give them time. And then I flipped to the same night in Staten Island, where there's an anti-immigration rally. I don't even want to say anti-immigration. They're anti the migrant shelter in their community. I do see a lot of dumb things that happen. I seen a drunk man who was at this rally, acting like an idiot, but nothing where he should have been arrested for. He was talking smack to the cops, and he was arrested. He was arrested and put through the system for jaywalking. I mean, so on one hand, I see in Staten Island, there is zero tolerant policy. You're going to get arrested for jaywalking and get through the system and spend the night in jail. And then I flipped to Manhattan in this far left protest where we have members of BLM and Antifa who have been out there the last 3 years causing ruckus, and now all of a sudden they care about Palestine. They couldn't point out Palestine on a map. They couldn't tell you anything about the history of Palestine. They're a complete anarchist in trying to upend our society and bring in Marxist socialist environment. And they're out there, they're ripping down flags, they're destroying property, they're kicking doors in Grand Central Station, breaking the windows. They're shutting down mass transit. They're impeding pedestrian traffic, and they're impeding vehicular traffic, all of which are crimes that should be enforced with zero tolerance, but there is zero enforcement that I'm seeing. That's my opinion. Lattina, what do you believe that you're seeing? Do you agree with me or not?
No, I agree with you 100%. I see exactly what you're saying, because I've been out there on the ground, and, I spoke with some of the members of OCR, and I'm like, what do you want to do? Do you want to organize something to stand with the Jewish community? And they're like, no, let's sit this out because it's getting violent. This is not about freedom of speech. This is about, them being radical. And it's New Yorkers need to wake up and see that this is what's going to happen in the future. We should be very much afraid. And if it was up to me, you stomping on the American flag, you left your country to come here, right? You come to our country, into our city, you disrespect our values and who we are and what we stand for in this country as a whole. You should be deported. Because if you don't respect our values and what we stand for, why are you here? You came here, some of them came here illegally. You need to be deported. It's getting very dangerous. And I don't know what to expect in the future. I think there something is going to happen in 2024. I can't quite put my fingers on it, but all those activists you see coming out there, they're getting paid. These are George Soros funded groups. They're getting paid every time. This is like a paycheck for them. And I think they're going to host another rally this Friday in the city. It's alarming.
John, excuse me. John and I were talking yesterday on the phone, and we were saying the same thing. I said, isn't it interesting? Where are people getting all these Palestinian flags? It's amazing. What store is selling all these flags? Is there a pallet that turned up just like during the George Floyd riots with bricks? Is there a pallet showing up with Palestinian flags? Because it's amazing. Everyone has a Palestinian shirt. Everyone has a Palestinian flags. And what's sad exactly that is most of them are unaware of what they're actually pushing out there, because it's really a cover up for BLM. It's about George Floyd. Ultimately, it's about the DSA, and it's about Trump not getting in office. This whole thing is orchestrated. Honestly, it's positioned for January of 2024. this country is headed down some scary things. I'm a veteran myself. I served in the Marine Corps. I served this country honorably. I love this country. I'm proud of it. And it's scary what's going on. This country is being eaten from within. There's definitely going to be a terror attack. When it's going to happen, I don't know. It's unfortunate, and we are the most weak and vulnerable we've ever been. This is not the World War II era, the best generation that this country's ever known. We have weak, emasculated men. I don't even know what a man is anymore. I see some of these young kids. I see them on TV because I'm out in Southeast Asia right now, and I see these. I don't even know, what is a man anymore? In comparison to when John and I grew up and we played G.I. Joes, and it was all about masculinity and being prepared so that we could become men. I mean, you are, as a man, you're the first line of defense for your family. And we're just not prepared anymore. Men are not prepared because we are headed for World War III. And the young men in this country have to be young men and women. Right, because it's co-ed for the military right now in all facets of the military. Men and women have to have those masculine traits so that America can survive. If you look back at history, all empires fall. Is this empire going to fall? I hope not. It's scary right now. The violence that we're seeing right now, and people, honestly, they don't really understand what violence is. It's not what's going on TV. John and I doing police work for 20 years. I spent almost a year in Iraq. I know what violence is. And it's not something we want to be a part of. It's a last resort. It's scary what's going on there right now. It really is. And these kids don't understand, but they're being heavily funded. And that's what keeps them going. And that's why I give you credit. You're an advocate. You're doing this because you're passionate about it and you care. We need you to continue to be out there pushing the community and being influential. And I know it's true what you said earlier, that the community cares. And it's unfortunate. It's about low votership. I know that because I myself, I was getting awards for the community for the police work that I was doing with my teams. And it really was my teams that was doing the fantastic job getting awards for the same thing simultaneously I was getting civilian complaints from. So I know it's about low votership because the people do care. The people want the police. They want public safety. They want prosperity. They want to feel safe. We need to bring this country back to where it needs to be. We need people like us. It's unfortunate. We're not to toot our own horns. You say common sense, but John, it goes with what it says on the back of our T-shirts. It says we are the experts. We are the experts. We're the experts in policing. You're the experts in community. We are the experts. We need to be out there, and that's what the common sense is. It's showing compassion for what makes sense, societal norms. So, Lattina, I really thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I know that you're banging your feet on the ground and that you care. But tell us what makes Lattina care, or why don't other people care?
That's a very good question. No one has ever asked me that question ever. I think it's because I worry about the younger generation. I'm a mom. I have a teenager, and I worry about her future. I worry about what's going to happen to children her age. And I think that we are doing a disservice by not fixing the issues in our community. So I think that it's our fight. We need to fight for our families. We need to fight for the younger generation. It's our responsibility. Our parents did it for us. Our grandparents did it. We have to do the same. So I feel like for me, I'm like mom to the younger generation, and it's our responsibility to make it right. Guide them, educate them, teach them the right way. So this is personal for me. It's very personal because I have my kid. And even if I didn't have a child, if I wasn't a mother, I come from a very large family. I'm one of 22 kids. Okay. So I have siblings and I worry about them. I want to make sure that they're okay. God forbid if something happens to me, I want to make sure that they're safe, they're thriving, and they're in a peaceful environment. So yes, it falls on us. We as a collective have to make it right.
No, listen, I love it. I love it. I appreciate you coming on. I'm sorry I fumbled the opening, but
No, it's okay.
I really, I just think that this is exactly what we're doing now. Common sense, have discussions, not afraid to disagree, just put our thoughts out, whether we agree, whether we don't. I mean, you know, we keep having people on that, you know, you people from the outside would sit and say, oh, they wouldn't agree on one thing. And we sit down and yet we agree on everything. So I think that what people don't see is that actually reaching out and talking creates a bridge, as opposed to listening to a news station as your religion. I'm Fox News and whatever they told me is the truth, but I'm CNN and whatever they told me is the truth. I mean, that's not the way. We're people, exactly what we're doing here. Lattina, could you tell all of our listeners where we could find you? And you know, a way we could find you on social media, where we could go find One City Rising, and anything that you could leave us.
Yes. So on Twitter, you can find me under my name, my first and last name, Lattina Brown. Facebook is a little bit interesting. If you can find me, you could just type in my name, Lattina, with the D at the end, because unfortunately, Facebook doesn't think that Lattina is a real person.
Yeah, I can't get on either. I have to use Johnny Mac.
Like,
They won't let me all my name, and I couldn't even do Johnny Mac with my real date of birth.
dude, like, they ask for my ID and they don't think I'm real, but I'm going to handle that legally on a separate situation. But for Instagram, you can find me as Brown for the Bronx. TikTok is my first and last name, Lattina Brown. I also have a YouTube channel. But for One City Rising, you can find us on Twitter, which is One City Rising, one spelled out, ONE City CITY, Rising RISING on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook, and we're going to be having a YouTube channel as well coming out soon. So, you know, we're just looking for a collaboration from people from all over. Doesn't matter if you live in Florida, Canada, wherever you live. We would love to have you become a member and support us. And let's work together to push out socialism and progressive ideologies. Let's get them out of office. You know, if we have to rally together to support a candidate that's running for president, because to be honest with you, I don't care for Joe Biden. I really don't. Let's work together to make it right. We created this mess. Let's clean up our backyard.
Outstanding. Lattina, it's been a pleasure to have you on here. I think some of the stuff you said is extremely impressive. I think your insight is extremely valuable. I mean, you're a real person. You're a real person in New York City. You're exactly what people want to see. They want to hear. I see a future for you legitimately in politics. I know that you're shying away from these politicians and you want something different. But people, the narrative is shifting. People want real people to be politicians.
Yes.
And I do see a future for you in that. Absolutely. You know, a strong advocate. And I'll never forget offline and also here on the podcast how you explain the difference between activist and advocate. I think that's great. I think you should continue that. That should be a slogan. You should be out there pushing that to the people and understand that you're not here to actively cause problems. You're an advocate. You're here to support the people, support common sense, to build these neighborhoods, bring them back to where they could be proud New Yorkers. New Yorkers are just leaving. If they're running away, we need to bring them back. New York was a great place. I mean, John and I talk about it all the time. We're proud to grow up in New York City. We're New York City kids. I mean, even now, you know, I'm in Southeast Asia. When people ask where I'm from, I don't even say the U.S. I say New York. You know, and they still haven't felt the politics here. So still, New York still has that mystique to it. But we need to bring that back, right? So, Lattina, again, thank you for your versatility. I mean, there was an array of questions here, different subjects, and you really showed your versatility and your insight. So thank you so much. John, it's always a pleasure. You know it. I think it's time to get a word from our sponsors. Tina, thank you so much. I hope we stay in touch.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Tina, anything you want
absolutely.
to say? Did we miss anything? Anything you want to say before we go?
No, but John, I think you should consider running for office. You'll make a good candidate.
I don't know. I like making memes about politicians too much. You
should think about it.
I miss my memes. They wouldn't get any. You know?
But think about it.
Yeah, but listen. word from our sponsors. But before we go, please follow Lattina on social media. Go to One City Rising, sign up, like Lattina said, wherever you are in the country. It's definitely worth it to do it. We need to build a middle ground in this nation. So I actually am a member of One City Rising. I believe in that mission. We got to keep doing that. So, ladies and gentlemen, the great and powerful Lattina Brown.
Thank you.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.